The UN says it's the end of the M23 rebel group in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The rebel fighters have been driven out of their strongholds by the Congolese army, but they're still fighting in parts of the country. So is M23 losing its fight against the government? And what now for Rwanda and Uganda, which have been accused of supporting the rebels? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mike Hanna. The M23 rebels in the Democratic Republic of Congo are on the brink of defeat. That's according to the United Nations. The special envoy told the Security Council the armed rebel group no longer poses a military threat. The announcement came after M23 fighters abandoned most of their military positions in the eastern Congo after 4 days of heavy fighting. Peace talks between the government and M23 broke down last week, despite 2 months of relative calm in the region. The M23 is a rebel group mostly made up of former Congolese soldiers who mutinied in January last year. The fighters accuse the government of failing to meet the requirements of a 2009 peace deal, in terms of which the rebels were to be assimilated into the military and the political system. Malcolm Webb sent us this report from a deserted M23 military post in Rumangabo, near Goma.
The M23 rebels fled from this military base yesterday, and they've left behind a lot of weapons. These big rockets are fired from the back of a truck on a multiple-barreled launcher. Here there's hundreds of different mortars in all different sizes, boxes of ammunition. These are detonators. The Congolese army says that both neighbouring Rwanda and Uganda have been providing weapons like these to support the rebels, but both countries deny it. There's now only one town left in rebel hands, and the Congolese army says it's about to make the final push.
Well, North and South Kivu in the eastern Congo have long been flashpoints for the region's conflicts. Bordered by Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda and Tanzania, Kivu has found itself at the centre of much of the region's unrest. The two Congolese wars of the 1990s, which involved up to 7 African countries, both started in Kivu. And it's not only been a base for M23 rebels. Kivu's also home to the Mai Mai, an umbrella term for armed forces led by warlords and tribal leaders who were formed, they say, to defend their local areas. They've also had a hand in every conflict that's originated in Kivu. And another reason for foreign interest in the area, it's rich in mining resources, gold, coltan and tin. For more on this, I'm joined by our 3 guests. From Washington, D.C., Herman Cohen, former Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs and former U.S. Ambassador to the Gambia and Senegal. From New York, Kambale Musavuli, National Spokesman for Friends of Congo. And from London, Richard Dowden, Director of the Royal African Society and author of Africa, Altered States, Ordinary Miracles. Welcome to you all. Let's begin with Richard Dowden. Can a group like M23 be defeated? The special representative says it is. He was cautious to say it's been beaten on a military level, but will it go away, this group?
It's impossible to say for sure, but I would point to 2 things. One is the terrain. This is a very thickly forested area, very hilly, and therefore small groups of people can melt away very, very easily and reform. And the second thing is that they have been supported by Rwanda, so many of the troops could possibly just come over the border to Rwanda and be secure there, because the UN and the Congolese army won't come across that border and regroup on that side of the border. So I wouldn't say for sure this is over.
Well, Ambassador Cohen, your view, is the announcement of an end of conflict premature?
I don't think so. I think I agree with Richard that they may melt away and they will not be militarily defeated. But I think Rwanda has decided to stop supporting them because they received a very strong signal from the United States that enough is enough and there must be peace brought to that part of the world. The U.S. stopped all military aid to Rwanda. That is a very strong signal of disapproval. So I believe Rwanda is stopping their support. M23 will lose its ability to hold territory and the Congolese sovereignty will be restored. but there will be militias and others running around, and it will still be unstable. But I think the game is up for M23.
Well, Kambale Musavuli, picking up there on what Ambassador Cohen said, many have argued that M23 are a symptom rather than a cause, and unless there is a regional agreement involving Rwanda, Uganda, and indeed the DRC, then the possibility of such groups emerging again is always there.
And you're right by stating that. You know, the M23 is really a fabrication of the many hosts of rebel groups we've had in the past in the Congo. Before M23, we were speaking about CNDP, and before that, it was RCD. Picking up on Ambassador Cohen's point, I think that the international pressure worked on making sure that Rwanda stops the support of M23. But I'm still waiting to see Rwanda's will to really be a stakeholder of peace in the Congo. And the way I will know that Rwanda is serious about actually being a stakeholder of peace and stop supporting rebel groups will be for Rwanda to turn over some of the sanctioned individuals they have in Rwanda. You know, the M23 fighters crossed the border. Last year we have hundreds of them who have received asylum in Rwanda. You have others who have been there for years, like Jules Mutebusi and Laurent Kunda. So seeing that show of good faith will really point out that now the support has completely ended. And cutting that line of Rwanda support of militia groups will help in the stability in the eastern part of Congo.
Richard Dowden, let's be very clear here. We are saying that the observers allege that there has been Rwandan and Ugandan support for groups like the M23. To what extent is this correct? Are they also perhaps emerging out of internal conflicts within the region itself rather than any governing hand guiding them?
The M23 are mainly made up of Tutsis, which are also the leadership of Rwanda these days. So they are a natural ally, and having been in that area, I know well that they're not entirely accepted by the local people there in eastern Congo. So they were like an almost alien group in some ways. But it depends very much on what the motives of Rwanda and Uganda are in the region. For a long time, they argued that they had to be in there and have a role there because groups that were former génocidaires in Rwanda and also anti-Museveni groups from Uganda were operating there, and that was purely military. But people have become more and more interested in the economic benefits of eastern Congo. Certainly Rwanda has very little minerals under its territory, and I think what we're seeing is that Rwanda wants all the wealth of eastern Congo, which is considerable in terms of minerals and also agricultural produce, to come back out of eastern and head eastwards through Kigali and also come up to Kampala in Uganda, making those countries much richer. And that may be their motive. It may be an economic motive more than a purely military one.
Well, I want to touch on that economic motive and imperative in a moment, but Ambassador Cohen, I just want to pick up on something that you mentioned there in terms of U.S. pressure. There has been a new U.S. ambassador in the region who, by all accounts, has brought pressure to bear on the Rwandan government. This remembering, too, that weapons deals have been put on hold, training has been put on hold. Has there been a real effort by the United States to pressurize the Rwandan government in particular?
I think there has been. If you look at all of the public statements by American officials, including Ambassador Susan Rice at the UN, until very recently, nobody has mentioned Rwanda as the sponsor of M23. But they did mention it. The new U.S. ambassador, Senator Feingold, has been very vigorous in saying that Rwanda is sponsoring M23 and they have to stop it. Even President Obama, when he was in East Africa, refused to utter the word Rwanda as a sponsor. But Feingold, he's being very forthright, very honest. He wants to bring out the facts, and he has said it. And now the U.S. government public statements in Washington are mentioning Rwanda. So Rwanda is getting the message that they cannot continue to defy the international community indefinitely. They've been doing it since 1996, and now the game is up. They have to stop.
Well, Kambale Musavuli, your view on that. Rwanda, in a way, has been a symptom, some would argue, of U.S. guilt, remembering the genocide that happened there on President Clinton's watch. Do you think that there is now a seismic change in terms of U.S. attitude to the situation there?
I mean, I'm seeing some indications that there is a shift, but I do not think it is enough. I don't believe in the rhetoric of public statement of American officials around the issues of eastern part of Congo, specifically Rwanda's influence in the east. What I would like to see the U.S. administration do is to hold true to its word. President Barack Obama, when he was in Ghana and when he was in South Africa, stated clearly that Africa does not need strong men, Africa needs strong institutions. The United States policy toward the Great Lakes region has not changed. The United States still supports strong men in the region. Museveni of Uganda, Kagame of Rwanda. How will I know that he has changed? Is by Barack Obama holding true to the law that he wrote as a senator, Public Law 109456, which clearly stated in Section 105 that the United States, the Secretary of State, has the power to withhold aid to any nation destabilizing the Congo, if they have the evidence to do so. But seeing that they have the evidence, a statement is not enough. I want to see a complete stop of our taxpayers' money going through this government that's continuing to supporting rebel groups in the part of Congo. And of course, I should thank former Senator Fango, who's now the special envoy, for continuing to push for diplomatic pressure on Rwanda. But statement is not enough. We must go through sanctions. And we see U.S. engagement around Syria with aggressive diplomacy being a way to bring about stability in that country. And I want to see the same type of engagement when it comes to the Congo, with aggressive diplomacy, starting with the commander-in-chief who wrote the law on the Congo.
Well, Richard Dowden, your view on that. Do you think that the U.S. in particular has not been strong enough when it comes to the situation in Rwanda?
My impression is that the American various departments are divided on this. Certainly, Kagame, Rwanda, made great friends with the American military. He's very close to the military and the security people, whereas the State Department and people like that would want to balance interests in the region. And so there may be a debate going on in Washington itself about how much they should protect Rwanda from attacks from eastern Congo, or the threat of attacks, and how much they have to accept that this is actually a paranoid fantasy, and actually what they need to do is stop Rwandans supporting groups like M23 in Congo under the guise of their own security, but in fact what they're really doing is promoting their economic interests in the region and their general control over extended across their borders. You can understand why the Rwandans might feel that, but I think that another genocide is exceedingly unlikely unless it started within. It's unlikely to come across the border, and I think most people now accept that. And with drones going along up and down the border as part of this new group, they've got all the protection they need.
Well, Ambassador Dowden, Ambassador Cohen, I apologize, is there a debate going on within bodies like the State Department? We've seen in other regions of the world a shifting of the U.S. axis of interest. Is this happening as well in areas like Rwanda and the DRC?
I think there is a shift. There has been an issue of guilt feelings because we didn't come to the aid of the Tutsis who were being massacred in 1994. This existed right through the end of the Clinton administration. The Bush administration was more realistic and asked the Rwandans to take their troops out of the Congo, which they did, but they maintained their surrogates, M23, RCD, CNDP, and the Bush administration did not take any action against that, because mainly of the military connection. The Rwandans were very smart about military cooperation. They sent troops, peacekeeping troops, to the Sudan. They've been very cooperative in the United Nations on security issues. They've always followed the U.S. line. So the U.S. national security establishment was very reluctant to clamp down on Rwanda. But now, with the situation so bad in the Eastern Congo and the millions of displaced people, I think the U.S. government is saying we have to stop. We don't want to punish Rwanda and Uganda because we don't want sanctions because their economic management has been so good. What we wanted to do is stop destabilizing the Eastern Congo, and I think once that is established, then we can look at regional arrangements, economic cooperation, and economic union between Eastern Congo and East Africa, which is their natural outlet. But the first thing must be to stabilize and bring peace to Eastern Congo. And I don't think sanctions are necessary now. I think it's happening.
Well, Richard Dowden, we've been talking about the US, but then let's consider the United Nations as well. We have had UN involvement there for a period of time, a UN force in position, and you've also had an absolutely unprecedented creation of a force intervention brigade. For the first time, the UN Security Council endorsing a group to conduct offensive operations. Do you think this is a sign of UN concern that it was, in a way, losing control or losing its grip on the situation?
Yes, I do, and that creation of a special force under Chapter 7 plus, as somebody described it, you know, and it's obviously been involved in these operations because a Tanzanian soldier, as part of it, has been killed. The UN force up until now has been more about monitoring and watching rather than actually getting involved. It's difficult terrain to fight in, but nevertheless, now it seems that they have gone on. They really have gone on the offensive, and I think one of the things that shows is that while the Rwandan government and Ugandan government have done lots of work in Washington over the years trying to get support, what they haven't done is convince their fellow African presidents, because if the African Union had said no to that, I think they would have, you know, they'd have had to back off. So I think that what it shows is that most African states actually support Kinshasa against and the Democratic Republic of Congo against Uganda and Rwanda, which I think is quite interesting, that they haven't got a great deal of support in Africa itself, and that's allowed the UN to strengthen that force and use it as an offensive force to try and drive M23 either underground or across the border, or, as they claim, destroy it completely.
Well, remembering too that this force intervention brigade is composed of South Africans, Tanzanians and Malawian troops at present. Kambale Musavuli, do you welcome this more muscular attitude by the UN? And also, picking up on that point of Richard Dowden, the fact that this is an African, essentially, intervention force on the ground.
Yeah, but the genesis of the intervention brigade, this was the Rwandan idea. When the M23 was created and the Rwandan special forces went back to Kigali, Rwanda proposed the idea of having a regional force to go after the negative forces in the Congo, FDLR and any other militia. This idea was taken up by the SADC nations who say, well, we welcome this idea and we are going to send SADC nations. And the UN just pretty much hijacked the process or took up that idea. They wanted to have the SADC forces to be under the UN command. So it wasn't an idea of the United Nations. It really came out of Rwanda's first saying that we want the intervention force, but it has morphed to what we see now. Of course, military pressure has helped. In the past week, we have seen what has actually taken place there. For the local population, they are happy with the stability that they are seeing now, the security, the form of security they're seeing. But military pressure will not be enough to deal with the political problem. And I also want to hint on Ambassador Cohen's point. I think at the current configuration of the Congo and the situation on the ground, speaking about economic integration is really difficult when we haven't received justice and accountability for the crimes that have taken place in the eastern part of Congo. Economic integration at the current configuration only rewards the looters without even holding them accountable in the case of Uganda, who have been found liable to owe Congo $10 billion at the International Court of Justice in 2005. They still have not paid the $10 billion to the Congo. In the case of Rwanda, which has committed atrocious crimes and was implicated in the UN mapping exercise report by committing war crimes, crimes against humanity, and possible genocide if proven in the competent court. So it's dangerous to use that idea. I've heard that many times even from Mary Robinson, sticks and carrots, economic integration, when we're not actually holding those who are committing the crimes accountable. It's really rewarding them. But what will be the path for peace that we believe? We think that we need to follow what Kikwete shared. You know, Kikwete said that FDLR need to go back to Rwanda. Most of them did not participate in the genocide. There need to be an inter-Rwanda dialogue. There need to be accountability for the region, and also not to forget the Congo. We have an issue with the Congolese government which lacks legitimacy, and support the Congolese institution in the democratic process to really have the voice in the government so they can deal with the many different issues that we have in the country.
Well, let me go to Ambassador Cohen on that particular point that you raised there, the issue of economic development, but being preempted in a way by judicial processes. Do you think that the two are interlinked and one must follow the other?
I would be very careful about that. When you talk about pillaging of resources, looting, raping, causing displacement, the Congolese military is very guilty of that, as much as the Rwandans and Ugandans. So I don't think we should start looking for criminality. The leaders of the M23, who have basically been accused and virtually indicted already, I think that's important. But to start looking for criminality and asking for indemnities and all that, I think I would not do that. I think we should look more to a South African solution. It's important to reintegrate the Congolese Tutsis who have been involved in all of this and who are subject to discrimination, starting with the Mobutu years. So I would not start looking for, quote, justice, because there are too many people who are guilty here on both sides of the line. And therefore, I believe once we stabilize the Eastern Congo, indict the leaders of the M23 who are particularly guilty, and then I think we should look more toward cooperation rather than accusations and criminality. We've had enough of that type of problem.
Richard Dowden, is stabilization possible, do you believe, given the history in that region?
Well, I think so, but like with a lot of African countries, the border is in the wrong place, the Rwandan-Ugandan border, because it is all one region. And at the moment, of course, it's ruled from a capital, Kinshasa, which is nearly as far away from that region as London is from Moscow. It's an absurdly huge country with very little, with no road that links east to west in it. So to try and reintegrate Rwanda and Uganda in with the rest of this vast country, Congo, with its capital so far away, is quite difficult, and it's been the natural hinterland for what is now Rwanda and Uganda for a long time, the Kivus. So it doesn't quite fit. But if they could get a proper economic arrangement between Eastern Congo and Rwanda, Uganda, and then out to the Indian Ocean coast, it would create huge wealth for the region.
Kambale Musavuli, very, very quickly, does the DRC have a responsibility in this as well? We've heard about the need of unity, the need for economic development. Is there a responsibility on the DRC which has not been exercised?
Yes, and that's what I hinted at my last point. That the reason why the situation has exacerbated to what it is today is because of the lack of legitimacy of the Congolese government. The Congolese state is very weak, and supporting institutions in the Congo, looking at even what's happening there. We are trying to replace Congolese people with international NGOs instead of having Congolese people actually dealing with the issues in the East. So supporting them in the democratic aspiration will be a great way to advance that, and specifically how. 2016, there are presidential elections. We still have not held local elections. Without citizenry, there is no state.
Well, at that point, I'm afraid we come to an end of this discussion. My thanks to my guests, Herman Cohen, Kambale Musavuli, and Richard Dowden. And thank you very much for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. If you want to send us your feedback, just email your thoughts to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. I'm Mike Hanna. Thanks for watching. Goodbye for now.